Hey! So, I'm still working on remaking Sync, and on the menu today is Graphics. So, this is my only 3D game as of now, and that's majorly because I'm not the best at 3D modeling. Okay, I'm terrible at 3D modeling. Okay, I actually don't even know how to make a 3D model of anything other than a primitive shape at all. I've tried to learn several times, but I've always found it super frustrating to do. There's so many things with 3D modeling that feel in my mind like they should be super simple to do. If you gave me a lump of Play-Doh, it would be easy, but it's so hard on a computer. Regular drawing and computer drawing don't have that. Drawing something on paper is more or less the same as how you draw it on a computer. 3D stuff is totally different, and I think that lack of intuitiveness is what makes it so frustrating to me. It's nothing against the software itself. Blender is a very powerful tool that can be used to make very cool things by those who are very good at it. But I am not one of those people, and I don't think I ever could be, because every time I try to learn it, I get really frustrated until I quit. So that didn't bode well for my first and only 3D game, Sync. But why would I make it 3D in the first place? Well, it was for one very specific reason. But to understand that, we need to go back in time and look at the original version of Sync. The original version of Sync was a two-dimensional web game made entirely in JavaScript. I started making it when I was in 7th grade. For reference, I'm 18 now. And though there are many things code-wise that I would change now, I'm really proud of what I was able to accomplish, despite my lack of experience then. And the puzzle idea was simple. 2 squares, move in sync, and get blocked by the walls. You win if you get them together to the same tile, and you lose if they leave the bounds of the level. And from then, I kept having new ideas. First, support for any number of red or blue finders, then colored walls, then purple walls, then reverse finders, then color switchers, then single axis finders, then axis switchers. And by then I had noticed a problem. It was a minor one, but a problem nonetheless. Let's rewind through that big list of features, which, by the way, was nowhere near complete. Stop right there. Unbeknownst to you, you're introducing a visual problem with no clear solution. You see, when 2 finders are in the same tile, well, that's it. There's no special behavior there. Each one acts as it normally does. But because of the nature of a 2D game, only one of them displayed. Before, that was fine. Each finder acted completely identically. Once 2 finders were in the same tile, they were functionally the same as having just a single finder there, since they always moved together. But once I added colored walls, that wasn't true anymore. If 2 red finders were in the same tile, they'd still be functionally identical, but if a red and a blue were in the same tile, and you pressed up below a red wall, they would separate. The blue would move up, and the red would stay where it was. So what looked like just a red finder could separate into a red and a blue finder. This wasn't too big a deal, since finders never started in the same place, but it forced the player to remember every finder that was in a location, which got more and more annoying once I added in purples and reverses and then single-axis finders. There were some ideas that I had over the years, but they were all kinda unintuitive and clunky. The only one that really made sense to me was making it 3D and representing finders as being on top of one another. And by then, I was really starting to dislike that old code, so I was willing to remake the game from scratch. So, I started remaking it. And after about a year, I actually remade it from scratch again, because I didn't like that original remake. Probably not necessary, but I made the code even cleaner and changed a lot about the mechanics. And in all that time, I hadn't made a single 3D model. I just used cubes and planes and added textures to them. I eventually added a star, but that's something I downloaded for free online. And the game at least looked better than the old web version, but it still lacked personality. I particularly wasn't fond of the textures of the finders themselves. So let's go back to the original game again and talk about the history of how finders have looked. At first, they were just solid colored squares. Then I added a few little faces on them. And when I added reverses, I made them green and orange originally, though they acted as if they were red and blue. And that was fairly unintuitive, so I changed the green ones to be a lighter shade of blue instead. But I needed better indicators, so I eventually made a little reversed symbol, and a little symbol for single-axis horizontal and single-axis vertical. And it was better, but I still wasn't a huge fan. The color and direction mechanics in the original version weren't really separate, technically. My code considered them to be completely different types of finder, with special cases written for each one. But when I remade it from scratch, I knew I wanted to instead have color and direction listed separately in the code. So I made an arrow system for the direction. So white indicates the positive direction and black the negative. So this represents moving normally, and this represents moving in reverse. If it's missing an axis, it doesn't move on that axis. And these arrows would always be black and white, but they'd be on top of a finder of any color. And that system worked, but I don't think it looked very good. The arrows got in the way of the face, and it didn't look very good in the first place. Those green, dead eyes and that unexpressive mouth weren't great. Oh, and the face was on every side of the cube. But I'm not much of a visual artist, and I mostly work on mechanics and art comes later, but I still wanted to clean that up and make it a real 3D model for my main puzzle element. But that brings us back to the beginning of the video. No matter how many times I tried, I couldn't. I even eventually made something that I liked, but I couldn't export it properly from Blender to Unity. But months later, I came up with a new idea, using voxel art. Like the three-dimensional version of a pixel. It's a relatively unknown style, only really used by some obscure games and oh yeah, freaking Minecraft. And I've played a metric ton of Minecraft. So I knew if I could make my 3D assets as voxel art, I'd be able to rework it a lot better. Of course, limiting myself to voxel art locks me into a very specific art style. Nonetheless, it was an artistic choice I was happy to make to mitigate the frustration of 3D modeling. So the first thing I did was rework the finder. I kept the same arrow system, but I put it on the sides and top and put the face in the front. And I made a little animation for the finder turning the right way and sliding in the right direction, and I coded the arrows on top to stay pointing in the right direction, despite when the finder turned. But that's not the only graphical update I've done. I've also decided to split the game into 6 different worlds with different environments in each one. So here they are. So I showed this before, but this is the first world. It was originally the entire game, and it's just filled with water. There are ducks and sharks and stuff. And this is the second world. It is, well, a forest, and it has some trees. Pretty straightforward. Has some hills too, I guess. And then we get to the one I'm most proud of, which is the desert. Got some cacti, got a rock. I mean, that's about it, but I like the sand, I guess. And here is the fourth world with snow and penguins. I liked those penguins, they were fun to make. And it's probably the music I'm proudest of. That's kind of why it goes on so long, this part of the video. And then we have the factory, where I didn't really make anything except these incinerators. So systematic murder, pretty fun. And then the final world has clouds and cities. Well, one city with a bunch of buildings. You know what I mean. Roads go everywhere, there are trees down there and stuff. And this one took forever to optimize. Like, the models were not working properly in Magica Voxel. It was a total pain. I couldn't figure it out. Okay, so that wasn't a very good explanation, so let's try a bit harder. So I'm trying to make voxel art, so what I need to do is make some art in Magica Voxel, and then export it to a format such that a normal 3D renderer can read it. Luckily, it has a nice button to do that right here. And that's what I'd been using throughout this entire visual overhaul, until I got to the last world, and I tried to tile the bottom of it with these cities. Then the game overloaded my GPU. There were many ways I tried to fix this lag, combining meshes, changing the lighting, making the buildings bigger so I didn't need as many of them, but the most helpful one was my realization that Magica Voxel wasn't nearly as good for this stuff as I thought. See, it's perfectly good for modeling, and it does a great job exporting to 2D images. Seriously, look at these isometric models. I can't draw anything isometric for the life of me, so if I ever wanted to make an isometric game, I will definitely use this program for all of its art. It looks so good. But anyway, and it'll make a good-looking 3D model. But what I learned when trying to solve this optimization issue is that its export is dreadfully inefficient. Let's look at it. See, look at this. This is a completely flat wall, but they, put a vertex there whenever you, change the color of the material. So there's just a million of these completely unnecessary vertices that lag the game like crazy. Look at this. Look at this. There should be 4 vertices here, one for each corner, but there are a million. It's absolute garbage. so terrible. Luckily, after scouring Google, I found Voxel Shop, which seems not very fun to model in, but luckily I don't have to. It has native support for the .vox files that Magicavoxel saves, so I can just load it in. Then I had to figure out how to export it. It had a bunch of options, and most of them caused the texture to display wrong for some reason. But I messed around with the settings until it did it right. And look at this! Look at this beauty. Perfect squares, everything as it should be, the most efficient you can make it. And that's it. I updated the graphics. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure to subscribe to follow the development of this game, and stay tuned for, I don't know, sometime soon, when I'm going to make a video on an automatic insult generator. See you then!